Welcome and thank you for joining us for our online studio tour of Dalita Martin's Black Box Press studio based in Huffman, Texas. This is the third of 7 online events in our Black Women of Print speaker series. I'm Sarah Kirk-Hanley, Executive Director of Manhattan Graphic Center. Our events are made possible by grants from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, the New York State Council on the Arts, the Pierre and Tana Matisse Foundation, and our supporters. Thank you. MGC's online talks, artist talks under COVID-19 are made possible with funds from the NISCA Electronic Media Film in partnership with Wave Farm Media Arts Assistance Fund, with the support of Governor Andrew Cuomo and the New York State Legislature. And now I am delighted to introduce Dalita Martin, whose process of layering, printmaking, drawing, sewing, collaging, and painting techniques allows her to create portraits that fuse the real and the fantastic. She combines signs and symbols to create visual narratives, working from oral traditions, vintage and family photographs, offering alternative identities and narratives for women of color. Her newest initiative, the Black Box Press Studio Art as Activism Fund, provides exhibition opportunities to artists whose work is grounded in social change. Martin received a BFA in drawing from Texas Southern University and an MFA in printmaking from Perdue University. Previously, she served on the faculty of the Fine Arts Department at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock. She is represented by Galerie Myrtis in Baltimore, Maryland, and Stella Jones Gallery in New Orleans. A few notes about tonight's event. Delita would like to keep this event casual and encourages comments in the chat box. If you have questions for Delita, please use the Q&A function, which you will find at the bottom of your screen. And now, please welcome Delita.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah, so much for having me. I am so excited to have everyone in my studio today. So I'm really just going to take you on a studio tour. I'm going to talk to you about some of the works that I'm currently working on now, and answer any questions that you have. So let's start off. I'm going to flip my screen a little bit first, and then I'm going to take you on a quick tour of the studio and kind of point some things out and talk about some things. So let's go. So I moved back to Texas. I was in Arkansas, and I moved back to Texas, I want to say about 6 years ago. And I specifically moved back in order to set up a studio. And we built this studio, I want to say we started in 2016. And so this part of the studio that I'm showing you now is actually the first build that we did, because we've renovated since then. So it's pretty much an open concept, and I use a lot of my space for multiple things. So the area that you're actually looking at now, I have my smaller floor model etching press and my litho press, smaller litho press. And it also serves as my library, my media area, and a little bitty snack area over in the corner for those late night studio hangouts, that kind of stuff. So this gives you an idea of kind of how I started out. So let's go to another section of the studio. And this is really my inking area here. This is my motorized press. I work on that. That one's pretty nice size, and I get to work on maybe 22 by 30, maybe a little bit larger. But as you can see, rollers, ink, all that good stuff. And now we move over here. Now this area of the studio is really, where everything kind of happens mostly, because I work really, really large. And as we go over to the larger pieces of work, I'll actually step in front of the piece so you can kind of get an idea in terms of size. So sewing station here. And here's some pieces that I want to talk about first, that I'll talk to you about first. So I very rarely work small, and these works are 22 by 30, but every once in a while I'll do a small edition of maybe 10, 15 at the most, but not really. And even with editioning, I do a varied edition. I don't like for the editions to, I don't like for everything to be the same. So, and I love putting what I call handwork into each print. So the print that you're looking at right now is a reduction print, a reduction relief print, linoleum. And here, I'll get in closer so you can see some of the details there. So again, the stitching, the paper, and we'll look at another.
Delita,
Yes.
we have a question from Meg of the Kala Art Institute.
Yes.
Have you always worked on at this scale?
I have
on
not.
a large scale?
No, I have not. So when I initially started working, I worked 22 by 30. That was the least frightening size to work in. And so that's what I was comfortable with. And when I left the university to go into the studio full time, I decided that I really wanted to take an opportunity to challenge myself. And so I thought about size. I thought about the content and the context of the work. And most importantly, I think I thought about medium. Like when we go to art school, if you're a painter, you're a painter. If you're a printmaker, you're a printmaker. But you know, when you do those things, you're in that area. And so I wanted to go into the studio and actually be a creator. So I didn't want to just be a printmaker. I wanted to bring all of the elements of creativity that I could into the studio. So I just kind of jumped off the cliff and the large pieces start to happen. So because I do work large, I work on the floor. As you can see here, there's evidence of my workings. But these are a couple of the larger pieces that I'm currently working on. So I do the main work on the floor, and once I get to a point where I need to look at handwork, or I need to kind of look at the perspective, then I'll hang the work on the walls. So just to kind of give you an idea of the size that I'm working with, you can see it's definitely, large. So this particular piece that I'm working on right now literally just needs handwork. And so I'll need to finish stitching here. And all of the stitching is done by hand. And I'll show you that in a moment. A lot of people ask me, well, are you using a machine? Is it just partially stitched, or does it just look like it's stitched? It's actually stitched, and it's sometimes difficult to stitch on the larger pieces. But I mean, I've been known to take 2 tables, put them there, droop the work between, and sit underneath and stitch. So just however I can get it done, that's what I do. So I've been very creative from that perspective. Okay.
We have one more question.
Yes.
Is stitching the last part? This is from Isabel Robinson.
Not necessarily. The first thing that happens is the background, which is the veilscape. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. That's the first thing that happens. The second thing that happens is the portrait. And from there, there's a push and a pull between the mediums and what comes next. So each layer informs what happens in the next layer. So I'll get a little bit closer on some of these. So the background on this one is silkscreen. And the drawing itself is charcoal. And let me know if you can't see the detail. And then we have the element of the decorative paper, and that part needs to be stitched as well. So again, the layering happens, and I'm very much interested in how the different mediums play together, because depending on what you lay down first, or what you put next to something, actually depends on how it works together. So I really enjoy the surprise of that, you know, printing a lithograph on top of a relief or vice versa. You know, it just, you never know what's going to happen, and you never know what you're going to get. So I really love that element of printmaking, the element of surprise.
We have another question about, we have two comments about how you go outside of the bounds of the edge of the, you know, the paper that's established as the base, you know, that it's kind of creeping the wall. Can you talk about those decisions and how you do?
Yes. So these works are from a series called, well, this one, the two pieces that you see the print actually leaving the page is from a series called I See God in Us. So I'm working with the idea, or really commenting on the fact that God and spirituality cannot be contained. And so these women, as they transition into their spiritual other, cannot be contained. And so they are coming off of the page into our space. And so, and that actually kind of goes back to the idea of size. When we talk about size of my work, size, going beyond the idea of, I guess, challenging myself, size was very intentional also, because I'm doing portraits of women that have historically been marginalized. And I wanted to make them larger than life. The idea that when you walk into a gallery, or you walk into a room with all of these images, are you the viewer, or are you being viewed? So it changes the conversation from, you know, this idea of, you know, being inspected by someone, or being watched. So it just kind of switches the conversation a little bit. So size is very much intentional.
We have a question about your use of the circle patterns in the piece with the blue that we saw earlier, kind of the blue patterning.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So there's a lot of, I guess, patterns and textures and things that you'll see in my work. One thing that you will see repeated throughout all of my work is the circle. And the circle represents the female. It represents the moon. It represents women. And so there's a female presence, there's a feminine presence in all of the work I do, whether it's an image of a man or a woman. And I'm just going to kind of pan these images, and you'll be able to see that there's always a circular pattern, no matter where you look inside the images. Literally without exception. So we'll go back over to these. And again, you see the circular pattern.
Great, thanks. So Alex has asked, can you please share how you use gelatin printing in your process? Thank you.
Gelatin printing, there's several different techniques, and to be honest with you, you can use gelatin printing to mimic pretty much all or most of the traditional printmaking techniques. I've used it to create prints that look like etchings. I've used it to create prints that look very similar to lithography. I love the it's kind of like a transfer method of working directly, almost like a mono printing method of using the gelatin printing. There's so many different techniques to use, so I just kind of vary between them all.
And Patricia Reeves asks, what is the substrate? How is the found paper applied When is the stitching done, and is there a varnish or finish?
There is a varnish. There's a light varnish that goes across. I use golden varnishes. I don't use the gloss. I love the matte varnish. It's very light coating. It stops a lot of the transfer, but not totally. So it's not like, it's not like a painting where you can just put tons and tons on. Here, let me show you the stitching on the work. See if I can switch it here. So again, all of the work is stitched, hand stitched. And so in order to stitch the work, I'll trace a shape onto the, I'll lay the paper where I want it or the fabric where I want it, and I'll trace out the shape. I'll pre-punch holes to kind of mark it in place, and I stitch.
Another, Natalie Adam asks, do you silk screen on top of the charcoal drawing?
Sometimes I do. It just depends. I mean, I have done lithographs on top of relief, on top of gelatin. I've reversed that. I have done silk screen with litho on top of that. You can reverse those orders however you want to. The only thing is with the etching has to be done separately. Obviously, because of the type of paper that I'm using, it doesn't really work well with getting down beneath the surface to pick up the ink. So I'll typically do etching on another paper and sew it back in or collage it back in. So also, I kind of wanted to show you another thing that I do is because I work in so many layers, I actually print on Mylar. And what that does is it really allows me to kind of see how the images that I've carved or are going to sit on the surface of what I'm doing. So I will show you an example here. So I carved these feathers and I actually printed them. So if I decide that I want to layer this on, I'm able to get an idea of what is going to happen with the work. So this is kind of like little pieces of Mylar are like all over my studio, and this is like a sketchbook for me. So I have one other piece that I will show you. This is kind of like my office area that, as you can see, probably doesn't ever get used, but office nonetheless. And let's see here. And I'll just take you real quickly into, I do letterpress as well. So here is the letterpress area of my studio. You can see type cabinets, all of that. And again, working on the floor. So sometimes I'll, bring some work over into this area that I'm working on when I start another piece. So this isn't finished yet. I still have a couple of more layers to do on that. But I'll give you that area. And so let's go over and look at this last piece that I'll show you here. Let me know if I'm walking too fast. I don't want to make anybody dizzy. So this is a piece that I started probably, I want to say earlier, maybe last week. Yeah. And again, working with relief. So the shadow figure that you see is a relief, and I'm overlapping the drawing with that. And I'll bring you in closer so you can see some of the details up close. So her skirt is stitched. I'm actually drawing on top of the decorative paper. And you see the relief that's printed here. And she is a charcoal drawing.
We have a question from Ariel about how important the charcoal handwork is to the overall composition.
Drawing was my first love. And like I said, it was really important for me to be able to come into the studio and open myself up in a way that would allow me to really be open to create. You know, sometimes we put limitations on ourselves, and I really didn't want to have that limitation. So if painting doesn't work, then I'll draw it. If drawing doesn't work, then I'll print it. If printing doesn't work, then we'll collage it in. We'll figure it out. And I didn't want to put those roadblocks in. And I think drawing was something that I fell in love with first. And I really got to a point, which, believe me, is totally not true. But in my mind, I felt like I had taken drawing as far as I could go. So the next natural step for me was printmaking. And printmaking to me is very much like drawing. I switched my pencil out for a carving knife or a crayon, or, you know, just a different surface and a different tool, but it's still drawing to me. So, so it's just drawing in general is important as well.
Harper, who is 9 years old, is curious to know how you make your art look so realistic.
Practice every day. Really practicing, looking at other artists, learning from other artists. Believe me, when I first started off, my father was an artist, and I would watch my father draw in the studio, and I would sit in the studio with him. And I'm looking at my work, and I look at his work, and it just did not match up. And I just ball that paper up, throw it to the side, and start all over. But continuously practicing, the more you practice, the better you'll get.
Okay.
So, awesome. Go ahead.
Another question about the drawing process from Jean Betancourt is, do you use live models?
Yes and no. When I originally started working with figures, they were inspired by women in my community and women in my family. And so I referred to them as spirit women. They were they were the great mother. They were accumulation of all women. You might see my mother's smile, you might see my grandmother's hands, you might see the lady across the street, you know, her posture. So it was made up of all women. And so I became very interested in how we as living beings interacted with the spirit world. And what does that look like? And how do we transition into being the spiritual other? So the backgrounds that you see in my work is a spiritual space. And I call that space the veilscape. And when you see the figure moving in and out of that space, that's that transition. That's how we transition into being that other. And that's what I wanted to show in my work, because I felt like, how do I want to talk about this, but how do I make it visually tangible for the viewer to understand that there is a spiritual space?
Great. This ties into the next question from Catherine Prose, and it is, can we go back to the circle relating to women? When and how did it occur to you that a circle represents the feminine?
If you look at African culture, the moon represents the female. When you think about the moon and its cycles and the female cycle and how they are tied together, that's one. But for me, my personal connection to it was when I want to say I was 6 months old, I wore hoop earrings. My ears have been pierced since I was 6. And so if you look at a lot of the figures in my work, they're wearing hoop earrings. And it's kind of like that item that signifies that you have gone through this rite of passage into womanhood. And so that's where my reference comes from.
Great. We have a bunch of questions about your studio and
Yes.
the presses, and we have a good printmaking crowd here. Where have you sourced all your, tell us how you started collecting your presses, also from Catherine Prose, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And where have you sourced all this equipment? Do you have any good tips for mailing lists or places to find presses? That's from Megan Broughton.
So, yeah, great. So I have two etching presses. I actually have a much larger press, and we're getting ready to do a third renovation on the studio. So we're going to expand it more. We're having to do that in order to get the floors shored up, where it can bear more weight. But I have a press in my garage that's actually 79 by 52. And so that, you know, I can literally put one of the larger pieces on there. The letterpress equipment was actually purchased from a shop that was in New Orleans, and they were changing their business plans, and they no longer were interested in printing themselves. And so I got an email from my mentor saying, hey, there's a shop in New Orleans for sale. And so I reached out to the shop and went up, saw the equipment, and purchased it. So one place for presses, and sometimes you can get etching presses and litho presses on there as well, but mostly letterpress equipment is Briar Press. So every once in a while, I'll frequent Briar Press just to find out, you know, if there's anything available. Conrad presses are amazing. Tom is amazing to work with. They have presses that are pre-owned, and you can purchase from them as well. So I'm just always on the lookout for equipment. I literally started when I was in graduate school at Purdue. I was teaching relief printing. And so I knew I wanted to have a shop, and I knew I wanted to maybe teach workshops sometimes. So I was like, I got to kind of figure this out. So literally I spent every semester that I taught students who were not returning, who weren't interested in printmaking, I would purchase all of their inks, their brayers, their tools, paper, whatever they had, I would purchase it at the end of the semester. So I was able to kind of stockpile, you know, these supplies. The only thing I did not have at that time was a press, which I later got as a gift from my husband. But just, you know, kind of hoarding supplies. And so I started giving workshops, started doing, you know, printing without a press workshops. And that was great until I got my press. And then I started doing small workshops and demos with that.
Great. We have a few more questions about process, and then some other ones about career related. Do you need a little break?
No, I'm good.
No. Okay. You're done showing us.
Yes, that's
okay.
The studio tour. I'm sorry.
I'm gonna come back on because
okay.
I was asked to go off video so everyone could see your beautiful work more clearly. But one of the questions that has come in about process, a few more. One is from Sumi Pereira, and she says, I assume I suppose you also consider the stitching simply as another form of drawing with thread.
The stitching actually serves another function for me. So when I was growing up, my grandmother was a quilt maker. Actually, I have like 2 or 3 grandmothers that were quilt makers in my family. And at night, we would sew together. The stitch that you see in my work, she taught me one stitch, and she called it tacking. And so I would tack, I would I would tack things for her, and she would you know, she would tell me stories. So the equipment that I'm sorry, so the fabrics that she had, she would have a story for everything. So she would use old clothing, and I felt like she was really kind of piecing and stitching together my history. And I wanted the viewer to be able to have that same experience. When I talk about these women and I talk about their transitions and I talk about their lives, I wanted to be able to piece their stories together as well. So that's kind of serves that function for me.
Great. So another one is from Patty Talbert. Do you make the decorative elements on the papers as well?
Sometimes I do. There are some papers that I print on. I will add a different pattern to, but mostly I purchase handmade papers and, you know, other decorative papers.
Patricia Reeves asks, please explain how you do the gelatin printing and what glue do you use for collaging the decorative papers? What is the substrate, and are the finished works framed, or do you just tack them to the wall when you display them?
No, all of my work is framed when displayed. In terms of the gelatin printing, you can either print on what they call jelly plates, which is, I guess, a silicone type plate. And there's a really good book out there, and I don't know that I have it handy, but maybe I can, I'll post it on my IG page and you guys can maybe look it up. But that takes you through all of the different techniques to use with gelatin plates. And it also gives you a formula for making the plates. So sometimes I make my own gelatin plates out of gelatin, just depending on what I'm trying to do. So for smaller prints, I'll make the gelatin plate. For larger prints, like the ones that you saw on the wall, I actually will use the silicone plate. And so I'll work directly on the plate, and it just depends on what technique I'm working with.
Okay, thanks. The next one is from Melissa Gill. How do you know when a piece is finished?
Hi, Melissa. I leave the work up. Sometimes I have to sit with the work for a week, 2 weeks, just or longer. It doesn't really matter. I don't really time it. And I can walk away, and sometimes I come back and it tells me what it needs, and other times it stops bothering me and I realize, okay, you're done.
Yeah, that's a question that I think a lot of artists have had to address, you know, and
yeah, I think
over the decades and centuries.
Yeah, I think you have to really become in tune with your sensibilities, confidence in your own work, confidence in your ability and in what you're trying to say. And I think when you're confident in those areas, you have a connection with the work that will tell you when you need to let something go. You know, there have been times when I've done work and it's like, you just really need to throw that away. That's not working at all. Or, you know, don't push it too far, push it just enough and come back later and it'll tell you what it needs. So I think you have to have a confidence in your work, your sensibility, to be able to figure out what needs to happen next.
Great. That's wonderful advice. We have several questions about career development and, you know, promotion of your work. So the first one is from an anonymous questioner. Do you have any advice for new upcoming artists?
Yes. Know what's happening in your community. Engage with artists in your community. Do artwork every day. And you know, you may not be able to create something every day, so I'm not saying it needs to be a finished piece, but be in a creative space as much as you possibly can. I'm in the studio every day, even on Sundays. And I probably, you know, I tell myself all the time, I'm gonna, you know, take a break. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that, but it's not true. I'm in here every day. And I think, you know, reading about art, you know, that counts. Interacting with other artists, that counts. Just know what's going on around you and stay active in the community.
Thank you. When did you decide to take the jump into being a full-time artist? This is from Catherine Prose.
About 2013. It was really scary. Probably the scariest thing I ever did in my life. I literally had nightmares. I really was like, maybe I should go, you know, rescind my resignation, all of that, but it's the best decision that I ever made. It pushed me into a really uncomfortable space because I had to learn the business side of art. Art is like a business, like any other business. You have to be present. You know, you have to create, I create the work. I'm the chick in the mailroom. I answer the phones, you know, all of that. You have to be involved in every aspect of it. You know, learn how to set the prices for your work, learn how to negotiate exhibitions. So I had to learn all of that. And honestly, it was scary. It was really, really scary. And I had to learn really, really fast.
That relates to Hallie Loneman's question, which is, what are some ways you get your beautiful artwork out into the world?
Wow. What I have figured out is social media is really great in terms of everyone has their platform. Like, I don't think Twitter works well for me, but Instagram has been great. Facebook has been great. Really, like I said, engaging in the art community, seeking out exhibitions. There's so many avenues, you know, you just have to kind of find what works for you. You know, some people say IG doesn't work for them as well as Facebook, or, you know, you have to find what your platform is and be persistent about it. Get a good website, make sure your website's updated, make sure you have, you're getting good images of your work, all of that. Be prepared if you're going out of town to hang out with a friend. Have a brochure, have a card, have some images ready. I used to have thumb drives that I had. It's like, hey, you know, I own a gallery. I work for this. Oh, really? Here, nice. You know, I'm an artist. Look at this. And so being prepared for whatever opportunity comes your way.
Great. One questioner noticed your framing must be very large. Do you have any special techniques that are required to frame the work? Do you get technical assistance from someone in particular?
I drop my work off at the frame shop. I work with Jay's Frames here in Houston, and they are fantastic. Not really my area, but all the work is framed wooden frames. I frame very simple because I don't like framing that takes away from the work. I want the viewer to be able to engage with the work. So simple white frame. The work is always typically floated because I love working to the edge of the work and I love edges. So.
Do you ever, have you, Laura Elsie asks, is it hard to say goodbye to some of your works? Have you ever had trouble parting with the piece?
I think I used to. I wouldn't say that I have problems parting with the work, but there are some times when there's work that I have to spend time with. So as an artist, I think that it's important to spend time with your work so that you can understand it, so that you can talk about it. And so there are those pieces that aren't quite ready to go out into the world because I need to understand it. So other than that, once the conversation's done, I can let the work go. I had a professor that once told me that when you become an artist, when you know that you can let the work go. That's one of the ways that you know that you've become an artist. So it's not really difficult, but I do understand there's certain works that I need to hang on to for a while.
Well, that relates also to a question about how teaching has influenced your own processes and conceptual responses.
Can you repeat that?
To what extent has teaching art influenced your own processes and conceptual responses?
I love teaching, and I think I love teaching really in the non-traditional way. So I love having people come to the studio and I will throw you an apron and it's like, okay, let's go. Or having people in the studio and asking questions and just kind of working my way or talking my way through a process. And I think teaching has, I guess, made me be a better learner, because I'm always open to learning. Like, I don't know everything. And so I think the two kind of always wanting to learn has made me be a better teacher and vice versa. So.
Great. What advice can you give to someone who wants to stop working a 9-to-5 job and pursue an art career with stability, especially finding the time and energy to work after working full time? As a person with disabilities, I fear leaving a safe, normal job makes it impossible. This is Tia Bowen.
First of all, get a plan. Have a plan. Have an exit plan. And that exit plan looks different for every single person. And the way I kind of started my plan was, number one, what type of artist do you want to be? And you have to be okay with that. Not your neighbor, not your friend, not, your instructor, your teacher, whoever. You have to be okay with being that artist. The second thing I did was I researched and I followed artists who were accomplishing the things that I wanted to accomplish. And I'm like, okay, what are they doing in their careers? What exhibitions are they doing? Who is in their social circle? What are they doing in their path on their path that I can adapt to what I'm doing, or, bring over into my practice to kind of get me to that point. And so that's literally how I started, was, with that. And also knowing that it doesn't happen overnight, and it's a lot of work and a lot of sleepless nights. And, you can't stop. You can't give up and you can't stop. So I think those are the most important things that I always try and touch on with people who ask.
Thank you. We have one more process question, and then I want to go to some more philosophical questions that have come up. This is from Patricia Reeves. What glue do you use and how do you avoid ripples? You're beautiful. It's beautiful work and you're a beautiful storyteller. Thank you so much for sharing. Had a lot of fantastic comments come in. I hope you can review them later.
Thank you. Bookbinding glues. I can't find mine right now because it's kind of everywhere. But look at bookbinding glues. Anything that bookbinders use to create books. The glue that I have is a bookbinding glue, basically. And that works great. I work on all paper. My paper is a heavyweight paper. It's an Arches paper. I buy by the roll. I get my supplies from Dick Blick. Did I miss something? I think that's, okay, great.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
So there's one more question. Were you done? I'm sorry, were you finished answering that?
Yes. I just wanted to make sure I had answered all the questions.
Yes, there are so many questions. Everyone's very curious and loving this event and your work. One person is asking, Hisla Bates, how can we purchase your work?
You can reach out to my galleries, Galerie Myrtis in Baltimore, Maryland, or Stella Jones Gallery in New Orleans. You can also send me an email via my website, Black Box Press, and we can get you an image list and get you any other information that you need. And if there's a particular piece that you're interested in, we can definitely point you in the right direction for that.
Great. And your Instagram is at Black Box Press Studio, correct?
Correct. Correct.
So that was another question that came in. But I'd like to move on to some questions about the current moment that have come in. They're from Lisa Murphy. How has this year's political and cultural landscape informed and shaped your work? How do you anticipate that your work might change in 2021?
I think my work is always changing. I always try and leave myself open for change. And so I don't really know how I will respond, but I have no doubt that the work will change. In reference to the political upheaval, the murders and the social upheaval that's happening in the world today, it has affected me deeply because, you know, we don't live in a vacuum. And I am the mother of a 17-year-old son, which, you know, brings me to a foundation, the foundation that we started, Black Box Press Foundation. We will be announcing our Art as Activism Fund. We'll be putting out the call December 1st for proposals. And we are going to be supporting artists who use their work to bring about social and political change. So yeah, it has affected me deeply. And what I've noticed is, you know, being on social media and not being able to necessarily go out, artists are creating some amazing, powerful work. And I firmly believe that art can change hearts, it can change minds, and minds can change systems, and systems can change lives. So we are an intricate and important part of what's happening, and our voices are very important and they need to be heard, which is my reasoning for starting the Art as Activism Fund.
That's a really exciting project, and I look forward to seeing what comes of it. Lisa also asks how she notes your work seems rich with narrative. How does story or poetry or literature inform your work? Do you ever write down stories behind your work?
I do. I very recently shared a few of my writings on IG that accompanied some of the work. I don't do it very often. Most of the time I keep my writings private, but literature plays a huge part in my work. I love sci-fi fantasy. Within my work, there's an element of fantastic realism, you know, the whole idea that there's this mythology or this fantasy that's rooted in reality is a part of my work. And I get a lot of that from literature.
Thank you. On that note, have you ever considered using text in your work?
Yes, I'm a letterpress printer as well. So there are the broadsides that I do. I do broadsides occasionally. I'll do an edition of like 10, maybe 15, and they are accompanied by a quote by Black women. I've done Alice Walker. I've done, I've done so many. I've done Nina Simone. I've done quite a few of those. So text does accompany my work.
I missed it when it came in when we were talking about your new fund. Gina Asibo asks, how can we donate to the fund?
You can go to my website, Black Box Press, and there's information on my website that talks about the fund, that tells you all about the fund. You will be able to donate on December 1st. The Black Box Press Foundation website will be going live at that point. It will take you to where you could complete your application and donate as well. Great.
Sean Pittman asks, when did you start your mug collection?
Oh my gosh, so I love mugs. I I love mugs, I love flip-flops, and I love tank tops. So I started my mug collection, I mean, forever ago. I'm always collecting mugs. And I've built up quite a collection, and I think they're hilariously funny. So I'll come in the studio in the morning and I will find a mug that fits my mood. And sometimes I post. I haven't posted in a while, and I was just thinking about that the other day. I was like, I have to get back on my morning mug shop post. So one of the things I decided, I was like, you know what? I love mugs so much, so why not create a mug line of my own? So this is one of my mugs, and so really excited to do that.
What, it's hard to see. Can you?
I'm sorry.
Oh,
So
there we
it's
go.
one of the
Oh,
images of
it's
my work.
your own work. Mhm.
Yeah, and so they're on my website, and you can check them out. But yeah, I love a good mug.
So yeah, you have a shop on your site with where
Yes.
you can buy some, like
Yes. There are
flag
prints
and
available
things.
for the Artist Activism Fund on there as well, which really kind of kicked off the fund. Was a print that I did of my son and of my niece. And so there are reproduction prints that are available of the original work, and 100% of those funds go towards the helping artist. And my mugs are there, and there are some works that are available as well.
So we have people from Ireland tuning in, just so you're aware.
Oh.
International audience tonight, and they're very much enjoying it. And now you can read the comments later. But we do have a few more questions going back to earlier topics. Another technique question. How many of your preliminary drawings and sketches do you hold on to, or do they become part of galleries or museums?
I don't do preliminary work. So I'm going to fess up right now. If any of my students are on here listening, I always preach to students, you should keep a sketchbook, always work with a sketchbook. And I've tried it, and I have 100 empty sketchbooks. So I don't work from preliminary drawings. I actually go straight to the work. And if something happens, then I'll paint over it, print over it, draw over it, or whatever, erase it, whatever I need to do to correct it. But I just found that working from sketches or preliminary drawings, it doesn't work for me in my process.
Thanks. The next question is, what advice can you give on an artist on finding representation? And this is from Patty Talbert.
So I have been fortunate to work with the galleries that I'm with for several years now. I think at least six or 7 years with both galleries. One of the things that you want to make sure of is that you're a good fit with the gallery. And it's okay for you to vet the gallery as hard as they vet you. And you have to, it goes back to what I was talking about earlier when I said you have to figure out what type of artist you want to be. So there are those galleries that, you know, they'll hang your work, but they're not going to do anything to help you advance your career. So you have to decide, is that the type of gallery I want to be with, or do I need someone that's going to help me grow my career? Do you want to be with a gallery that finds opportunities for you? Or are you okay with, you know, just, is it just about the money? So you have to decide what you want your gallery to do for you, and then you have to seek that out. But it's like, you really have to understand who you are as an artist and what it is that you want to accomplish. I would suggest that you know that before you seek representation.
Okay, thank you. And Lena asks, do you have tips for printmakers on a budget? What purchases to prioritize and how to set up a space, etc.?
So, funny story. That's how I started gelatin printing. Was I had no money, and I was literally in graduate school, and I had critique a week away, and I had to figure it out. So where do I spend my money? So I bought paper. I bought some tubes of ink, And I bought the book I'm telling you about, and I worked from there, and I bought some gelatin. So the gelatin, my matrix that I was working from, cost me $2, $3. And so that's what I did. So depending on, you know, if you want to work in lithography, you have the pronto plates. It's definitely less expensive. You know, you can work in that medium. You want to, you know, do etchings. There's the, you know, the dry point on plexi, you know. So, I mean, there's all different ways. It's just a matter of figuring out what medium. It all depends on what medium you want to work in. So.
Okay, and I think there are two questions about the book. I think the one you mentioned earlier about gelatin printing.
Yes.
And so you said you would put that on your Instagram?
Yes, as soon as we're done here, I'll go ahead and post that, and I'll also post the glue that I use as well.
Okay, great. I have to scroll back up. There are so many questions. Everyone's so fascinated with your work and your practice and the beautiful.
This is great. I mean, we're in, you know, the pandemic. You can't have anyone in your space, and it's like I'm so excited to be talking to all these wonderful people and printmakers, because it's like, as a printmaker, you talk to people about your work and their eyes start to glaze over. So I'm just happy to be talking to people whose eyes aren't like glossing out. So
yes, well, we are nearing up on the hour, so it's your last chance to get questions in. We don't want anyone to glaze over with Zoom fatigue, so we do have a few more questions I'll get in. One is from Sandra Fernandez. How large are your limited edition prints normally, and do you make fine art reproductions of your original work? If so, do you edition those as well?
My editions are typically, my varied editions are normally no larger than 10, edition of 10. They're only larger if the project calls for that. In reference to reproductions of my work, I do not do reproductions of my work. However, the Artist Activism Fund are reproductions of the original pieces that I gifted to my son and to my niece. Those are reproductions, and those are limited editions as well. They're an edition of 100 each.
Yes, I saw those on your website.
Yes.
They're very affordable if you'd like to support the fund. They're beautiful. We have another question about, would you consider having an assistant? I think you do have one, right?
I did have an assistant. At this time, I'm taking assistants on project basis only. So, you know, I'll have an assistant for maybe 3 or 4 months, and that's typically how I work.
Okay. And which artists do you personally follow and admire?
Oh, wow. Lots of different artists, lots of printmakers, print groups. I follow Beeza Butler. I follow Deborah Roberts. I follow Ann Johnson. I follow the Hapless Printmaker. I follow photographers, Toki Taylor. I follow a lot of different artists. So I'm one of those people that, you know, go through Instagram like everybody else, searching out amazing work. So yeah, I follow quite a number of artists.
I think that ties into the, you know, what inspires you, but maybe also what you said earlier in the talk, how you came about your own personal style with the history of your family. And but do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I look at all different types of art. I mean, if you look at my library, this bookshelf behind me is actually current research books. So I have a separate bookshelf where I keep my current research. So everything that I'm researching for a body of work will be on that bookshelf. But if you go through my books, there's books on pottery, there's books on sculpture, there's books on performance art. I mean, it doesn't matter what discipline it is. It can be used to inform what you're doing. So I get inspiration from all different types of media, all different types of disciplines of art.
Great. What type of printmaking is best for someone who wants to transition from drawing to printmaking? From Sean Pittman.
I did relief, and the reason I did relief first, there's lots to learn from relief, and there's a lot that you can do with it, and it's very direct. It taught me control in a way, because it's almost like I felt like I was drawing for the first time again. One of the difficult things, which I don't know if this was anybody else's case, but for me, I had a difficult time trying to figure out how to translate my drawings into printmaking. I think I spent a year of graduate school just trying to figure that out. The translation was not simple, and it was not quick. But I think relief, because relief is very direct, and it definitely can follow it up with the other mediums as well.
Kevin asks, can you talk about the importance or significance of color in your work, and have you ever employed the use of paints in your work?
Color is extremely important, particularly like the color blue for me. I mix blue into most of the colors that I use. Blue is a spiritual color for me. So color has a direct connection to emotions, to messages and symbolisms that I try and bring into my work. I use acrylic in the work all the time. My solid backgrounds are like literally oil-based inks on top of acrylic. So the solid colors, the solid flat colors that you see is acrylic, and the relief on top is an oil-based ink. So again, it sits on top of the surface very differently. It just, and I use it to sometimes touch up areas, to make certain little details that I want. So yeah.
Okay. And I think this is a good one to end on. Alex asks, what's a question you haven't been asked that you would like to be asked? Or in other words, what you have any final comments or?
Oh, wow. Wow. I guess I would want to leave on an inspirational note. I've gotten a lot of questions tonight, and as of lately, I've been getting a lot of business questions about the business of art, and how do you transition from the workplace going into the studio and really having that be your workplace? I want to encourage other artists that one thing about being an artist is we don't have a set path. If you want to be a doctor, you go through X number of years of school, you do your internship, you do this, you do that to get to every step. Well, we don't necessarily have that. And that can be a good thing, and it could be a difficult thing. But the good thing about it is that we have the freedom to create our jobs, to create what our jobs look like. And if you want to pursue art in that way, I want to encourage you to do so. Sometimes I cringe at thinking, what if I had never left teaching? I felt really comfortable with the paycheck every 2 weeks. I felt really secure, but I felt like the decision that I did make to leave was probably the best decision that I could have ever made in my life, and definitely one of the most important ones. So I want to encourage people, however you want to pursue art, however you want to, whatever you want to do it. It can be done. It's maybe not a straight path to do it, but figure it out.
Very wise words, as one of our board members noted, full of wisdom, and everyone's, I think, in adulation of you, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much
for sharing your studio and practice with us. And I'll just make some closing remarks. This video will be on YouTube. If you'd like to watch it again, we'll have it on our YouTube website, our YouTube site soon. And thanks to all of you. We had a great turnout. We had over 100 people here tonight from around the world and all over the United States. And it's been a wonderful evening. And or whatever time it is where you are, afternoon, middle of the night, apparently in Ireland. So it's great to have such an enthusiastic audience and great questions. Thank you, Delita, so much. We're all very appreciative of your generosity tonight, of your time and your wisdom and your thoughts about all kinds of things. And we hope all of you will join us for our next online talk in the Black Women of Print speaker series, which will be on December 10th, Thursday at 5 p.m. also, with Angela Pilgrim. And to be informed about our talks and events, you can follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Manhattan Graphic Center. You can also join our mailing list on our website, which is www.manhattangraphiccenter.org. And again, on our website, you can also find more information about Delita's Instagram handles and so on, and web pages and her gallery representation, and watch her Instagram feed for the Gelatin book and other things, her mug collection, and of course her beautiful work, which is the most important of all. So thank you, everyone, and have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Delita. Thank you.